The Bible reading this morning is from John's Gospel, chapter 12, verses 1 to 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here, a dinner was given in Jesus' honour. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me.
They were reclining at the table, just like this. This is how you reclined at a table in biblical times. It was a U-shaped table. It wasn't very far off the floor. So you'd sit like this quite a long time, just picking the bits of food. And then the people serving, people like Martha, they would come inside the table. And they would bring the food and lay it in front of the people. I say people, let's be honest, it was men reclining at the table. And the men would pick and eat. And then Mary comes along. And she doesn't go up the inside of the table. She walks around the outside. And she comes to Jesus' feet. Jesus, who is reclining at the table with Lazarus and others. While people are watching, we didn't read verse 9, but verse 9 says that there's quite a crowd that's gathered because Lazarus is there and there's this guy that's come back from the dead and they want to see him. And they come round and Mary comes round to Jesus' feet and she starts to bathe them in perfume. And then she lets down her hair and she wipes his feet with them. Martha is there watching. She's been doing her best to serve Jesus, as we know Martha can do. And she's been doing all the preparation and things. And then Mary comes along, her sister, and does this thing that nobody expects, that nobody does. Wonder how Martha felt watching her sister do this act. And then there's Judas, who makes it very clear how he feels. He can't help but have a go at Mary. But I wonder whether it is actually anything to do with the amount of money spent on the perfume. John suggests it isn't. More to do with the position of Mary, how he sees it, and her going beyond that position. I'm going to get up. Let's pray. Mother God, thank you that we can come here and explore your word and hear the stories of you through your son, Jesus. And may we learn from that story. And may we hear your word as we explore it now. Amen. So where's the tension in this story? Because it's one of those moments where families or people are gathering, and I imagine Jesus is hoping that it will be a really good get-together. Don't know if you ever do those family gatherings. I often have them at Christmas, and people sort of descend, and I love it. I really do enjoy it. But there are those moments where there's a little bit of tension, sometimes a lot of tension, and it kind of tarnishes the whole event. Have those times ever? Not many of you are nodding, so maybe not. Maybe it's just our family. Okay, there you go. Thank you. That makes me feel better then. I wonder if that's what's happened here. Because Jesus knows what's coming. He makes that clear. So he could probably really do with a meal with his friends who love him, and that being a good and smooth meal, and yet there's this tension. And is it really in the perfume? One of the main things that Mary does here that people don't do is she lets down her hair. I wonder if that's where the tension is. Women had their hair up and hidden. But here comes Mary, and she comes to Jesus, not at the inside of the table, but to the outside, to Jesus' feet, and she lets down her hair. Rather than people going, wow, people instead immediately jump on her. Judas immediately jumps on her and says, how dare you? And you know what? This has been repeated throughout history. Women getting ideas above their stations, having thoughts beyond what society says they should have, trying to do and achieve things that they know is right, but the world and men says isn't. We have put so much extra expectation on women as a society in the past, and still now in the present. I think the issues for women are better than they've ever been, but they're not perfect in this country. And in other countries, they're awful. And we think, well, that's a long way, that doesn't affect us. But let's get real. The owner of our local football team, Newcastle United, thinks that my wife and child are second-class citizens. They think that they exist purely to birth children, create heirs. It affects us. It's close. It's not something to dismiss. But I think this story shows, and I think the message I want to give to all females this morning, God expects no more of you than he does any other man, any other person. God values you just as much as any man and any person. God requests no more from you. Mary comes here to Jesus' feet. She pours perfume on his feet. She wipes it with her hair. Judas is there ready to attack her. And Jesus says no. Because what she's done here is shown me love. That is what God asks of us. That is what God desires. He desires your love. And how that looks is not affected or not defined by your gender. It is not defined by who you are or what you do. If you are a woman who wishes to be an engineer and serve God in your work in that, God values that just as much as he values a man doing that. If you wish to serve the world and God through nursing, then that's fine. God values that just as much as he values a man doing that. If you choose to serve God as a mother, looking after the household, that is fine. God values you just as much doing that. Because your value is not defined by your gender. Your value is not defined by what you do. Your value is not defined by whether you have had children. Your value is defined by God, and God says, you are loved and you are valuable. And there should be nothing else that defines our value. God is perfect. God's will is perfect. If you're going to have something measure your value, there is nothing better. And yet, so often the world tells women what is valuable. How they look, how they act, their very being. And men, we have to acknowledge our role in this. We have a role in creating this society that does that. We have a role in changing a society that does that. Too often we make this a conversation for women and we let women fight their own battle. This is a battle for us. This is a conversation for us. Domestic abuse is often from men to women, majority of the time. Sexual assault is from men to women, the majority of the time. Governments having inequality is male governments doing it towards women. I'm going to say all the time. Are we as men having those conversations? Are we doing what Jesus did? Are we standing up and saying to the people like Judas who are putting women down, are we saying no, they are valuable and their value is not defined by their gender and their value is not defined by what they do or who they are? Because that's our role in this as men. Standing up to the inequality. Having conversations about changing it when we hear it. And also not being a part of it. And this can happen. And if we're honest, we all sometimes take part in that. There are moments in my life where certain things just automatically go to Hannah and they shouldn't. And I don't know, I just sort of let her do them and she just sort of takes them on. Sometimes I have to stop myself and say, actually, why have I just let Hannah do that? I could have done that. And I wonder if sometimes it's that society sort of way we've been brought up and grown up that influences and allows these little prejudices to come in. I wonder if you recognize them. Maybe you don't, maybe it's just me. But our value is equal. We are all loved. And it doesn't matter what you do, what you have done. Your role as a woman. God says you are loved.